Hi. Welcome to the second episode of our talks about distribution agreements worldwide, dedicated to Vietnam. Our speaker today is Federico Vasoli, an Italian lawyer based in Hanoi, interviewed by Roberto Luzi Crivellini. In this episode, they'll discuss how distribution agreements are regulated in Vietnam, what are the important clauses in these agreements, what are the main issues in distribution agreements, and how to prevent or manage conflicts. Make sure you follow Legalmondo on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay updated on the next episodes.
Hi, Federico. Thanks for joining us for this second episode of our distribution talks worldwide. Today, we talk about Vietnam. And so, where are you based now, Federico?
Thank you, Roberto. It's great to be back. I'm currently in Hanoi. This is the view from our office. It's evening here at the time of recording, almost 6 in the evening. We're recording from Hanoi. We also have offices in Ho Chi Minh City.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So to get started, let us know, Federico, how are distribution agreements regulated in Vietnam?
Okay, so there is no single piece of legislation governing distribution agreements in Vietnam, like in many other jurisdictions. It is worth noting that Vietnam is a civil law jurisdiction, so there is a civil code that is quite similar to the French Code Napoleon in a way, and a number of laws that mimic those that have been implemented in China since the opening up of 1979. Namely for foreign investors, the law on investment and law on enterprises, which have been widely reformed, amended in 2020, and that regulate the presence of foreign distributors in Vietnam. So the main source governing a distribution agreement is the contract, the agreement, the written agreement per se. It is worth noting that, like in many other jurisdictions, distribution agreements do not necessarily have to be written. They may have to be written when they need to be registered before authorities. For instance, if you want to register distribution of beverages, agricultural products, etc., with the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Agriculture. But other than that, in theory, anyone could enter into any distribution agreement without writing it, which is something that I strongly advise against, of course.
Agreed, 100%. So okay, thank you. And what are the main clauses that you would, recommend those who need to enter into a distribution agreement in Vietnam to pay particular attention to?
Well, since we use the word to pay, for sure, the payment clause. So the price. I would say, first of all, representation and warranties. That is, there are some instances where the distributor needs to have specific licenses. I mentioned earlier the laws on enterprise and investments. If you are a foreign player, you are allowed to distribute to the public. So retail distribution is now permitted. We, in fact, have assisted a number of clients that took over operations from local distributors and now sell directly to the public within shopping malls, etc. That requires a specific license, which is called trading license. So if you sell your products through an international foreign-owned distributor in Vietnam, you will need to make sure the international distributor based in Vietnam through a Vietnamese company that is owned by foreigners has the proper licenses. So representation warranties, description of the products, payment terms, duration, and dispute resolution clause. Mind you, unless it is required by the law, as I was mentioning earlier, to register the contract before certain authorities here in Vietnam, it is not necessary to write it in Vietnamese, nor to have it governed by Vietnamese laws. So you might have theoretically a distribution agreement which is perfectly valid for Vietnam, which is written in Italian, and that is regulated by Italian laws, that is governed by Italian laws. The limitation of this thing is, of course, the enforceability of such agreement towards third parties in Vietnam, especially, again, if you need to have it registered with the authorities here.
Okay, thank you, Federico. And going to according to your experience, the main problems or issues that tend to come up regularly between a foreign manufacturer and a distributor in Vietnam, no matter if it's a foreign controlled company or if it's a local company? What are the main, let's say, recurring problems that you tend to see? That's my first question. And the second would be going to the dispute resolution clause. And normally, what kind of mechanism do you suggest to insert in the agreement?
Well, the main problems that arise with distribution agreements in Vietnam are normal problems that occur with these types of agreements when the players are serious ones. That is, generally speaking, non-conformity of the goods. So the goods that are shipped by the principal from abroad may not be in the right quantity or may not meet the specifications indicated in the contract, or the distributor may be late with payments or may not pay at all. But usually these occurrences happen due to external factors that influence the performance of the parties. These factors are not necessarily causes of force majeure, mind you. So it could well be that either party or both are fully liable for non-performance. So this is quite straightforward. When we talk about non-mainstream distributors here in Vietnam, of course, the other risk is smuggling of the goods. So the goods are effectively imported into the Vietnamese market and then they disappear or they get counterfeited. Indeed, there are problems with intellectual property rights. The products could be copied. There could be violations of trademarks, etc. But normally this happens at a lower level, or I'm not aware of any super high violation of trade secrets at very, very, very high levels. But normally when you play with mainstream actors in the field, typical non-performances, occurrences are those that I mentioned. So non-conformity of the goods to the contract and late or missing payments.
Okay, thanks, Federico. And
Or sorry, another thing that I mentioned, that I would like to mention is that because importing goods in Vietnam is not exactly easy, you need to have a license for importing goods. So you need to be a registered importer. Then there might be some customs related issues when importing the goods, but these are not necessarily non-performances by the distributor. And there might even be instances where the distributor is not importer. So the two things do not necessarily go hand in hand. But evidently, if the principal has an agreement in place with the distributor, and then the distributor relies on an importer in Vietnam, then evidently it is the distributor's responsibility and liability to perform and to hold the principal harmless in case there are violations or no performances by the importer.
good point. I was mentioning dispute resolution. What do you tend to recommend in distribution agreements in Vietnam to sort out disputes or issues that may eventually come up with your local distributor? What's the most effective based on your experience?
If the distributor is a Vietnamese-owned company or a Vietnamese natural person, I would recommend going to local mediation or arbitration centers. I would try and avoid going to court unless you really have strong evidence and supporting documents, because courts tend to be very formal in Vietnam, but they need to see very, very clear evidence against the other party. Yet, I would still go to Vietnam for either mediation or arbitration or both. There are good mediation and arbitration centers in this country. There are also foreign mediators and arbitrators that offer their services here. So I would suggest doing that. And evidently, in an arbitration or mediation clause, you can also choose the venue of mediation or arbitration. So you can choose whatever is more convenient for you, as well as the language. And if you're an international player, you may want to conduct arbitration or mediation proceedings in English or whatever other language you're confident with, but not necessarily Vietnamese. If the distributor is owned by a foreign-owned group, then it could make sense to go after the money. It could be that the local distributor is not exactly capable, financially speaking, so you might want to attack the parent company, provided you can, of course. you can pierce the corporate veil as the saying.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we can provide some links to chambers or bodies of arbitration and mediation that you
Oh, yes. Yeah,
would
absolutely.
recommend. We can provide them in the notes to this talk. So thank you, Federico. Maybe last takeaway to wrap up this chat on distribution agreements in Vietnam, what would that be?
The main takeaway is to protect yourself in advance. I wouldn't stress it enough when it comes to international business. So do protect your intellectual property rights well in advance, because it may take a lot of time to have them registered, and make sure that the contract is valid, effective, and enforceable wherever you go, including in Vietnam.
Okay, thanks, Federico. And
Thank you, Roberto.
I guess good point where we can wrap up and talk again soon, maybe to discuss Singapore next time.
With great pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Roberto. Bye all.